What is wrong with Spain? They started with this beautiful chocolate and they end up with this churros. So they discovered the chocolate cappuccino and they turned it into powdered cola cow, which they consume at breakfast. They discovered rich cocoa with chili, vanilla, and other beautiful spices. And they had yellow, red, and green hot chocolates from the Mesoamericans. And yet they ended up just copying the Italians. I mean, Nutella, that's an Italian invention plus an English invention, the sandwich. And that's for an empire upon which the sun never sets. And that's not going to win any prizes. And we can chart the rise and fall of Spain from the chocolate churros because it's a chocolate parable. And it becomes a metaphor for the decline and fall of Spain. Don't believe me? Why, if the Spanish were the first to discover chocolate, the first to introduce it in Europe in 1544, and able to keep chocolate a secret for at least 100 years, a whole century, from their European neighbors and friends, but they're not famous for chocolate now. It's Swiss milk chocolate that's famous. Why is it? And sure, the Swiss have a lot of milk, and sure, it pours down their mountain slopes. So I guess it kind of does make sense that they invented it. But they didn't actually invent milk chocolate, for that was an Englishman, Sir Hans Sloane. But they did invent the milk chocolate bar. And how did that happen? I mean, the Swiss don't have any overseas colonies. They don't have a famous seaport, to my knowledge. So they've got to import cocoa from their Italian neighbors. They've got to ask politely that they import it for them. And before the 17th century, a Swiss farmer would look at a cocoa bean and throw it away, thinking it was sheep's poo. But now they practically own chocolate. And it's difficult to understand why, because cocoa trees like saunas, not snow. And the Swiss are so proud of their chocolate, even though they don't make any. So what the hell is going on? And it doesn't stop there. Belgium luxury chocolate? I mean, Belgium doesn't have a rainforest. Last time I looked, loads of mud, yes, but you can't grow cocoa in Belgium. So that's strange as well. And the French, they have pralines. Nutella or gianduja comes from Italy. Mars Kit Kat bars from Britain. So, the Spanish must have lost it. So how did this happen? And I bet you can't name a single Spanish chocolate brand that's global. If you're smart, you might mention Valor, but most of us have never heard of it. So we need to ask the question, why is Spain not famous for chocolate? What the hell has happened? And the churros is Spain's only real contribution to chocolate today. I mean, the Spanish were calling chocolate black gold in the 16th century, in the golden age of piracy. And the British pirates were throwing it overboard, thinking it was sheep's poo or almonds. And I mean, if you have a monopoly of chocolate for over 100 years, an entire century, you would have thought that you're kind of better at it now. And, there is something called Spanish chocolate. And it's kind of coarse and grainy, and it's kind of like they're stuck in their golden age. It's stone ground, it's pure, but it's like a museum piece. So where is the innovation? Where's the creativity? And where's the industry? It's like they discovered chocolate, perfected it, and then took a siesta for the next 500 years. And chocolate gives us a clue, and I'm going to follow that metaphor. But so does the top 10 tourist sites. If you list the top 10 tourist sites in Spain, you're going to find something quite interesting. The Roman aqueduct, the Cordoba Islamic mosque, the medieval Santiago Cathedral, the Islamic Alhambra. But then it goes silent. And the first one we got is El Escorial, the imperial Spanish building in 1563. And that's a kind of lumpy, heavy, prison-like looking building with a massive church right next to the bedroom of Philip II. It's sort of pompous and overabundant. And then the very next famous tourist site, you basically have to wait until Gaudi and the Sagrada Familia in 1880. That's a gap that we need to explain, because in that gap, we've got one palace for a king who loved his religion. And chocolate tells us the same story about the rise and fall of Spain. So let's get into it and unpick what the hell happened. Now, when chocolate first came to Spain, it was the Spanish monasteries and the royal kitchens that were the first to add sugar, flavorings with cinnamon and vanilla, and they created the first European chocolate recipes. And they were amazing. And they kept these chocolate making techniques a closely guarded secret. And as I've said, they achieved that for nearly a century. So they had a monopoly on chocolate knowledge. And I think it's quite a fascinating story because it has the Columbian Exchange written all over it. Chocolate was to the Spanish what tea was to the English. The Spanish knew that chocolate was the food of the gods, or black gold. But something went wrong. And this fall from grace is even crazier or stranger because Spain has one of the world's most popular cuisines. It has tapas, it has jamón, it has olive oil. Spain has the world's top restaurants. Spanish chefs rank first in the world worldwide, with 14 chefs in the world's top 100. So it's not lack of cuisine that explains this fall. And, you know, if you try and unpick what the great achievements were from the end of the Golden Age to the modern time, you find a large gap. So at the beginning, you have the Cervantes with Don Quixote. You have the exploration of the Pacific and the Americas. You have Velasco, El Greco, Esteban Murillo. And you have one of the world's first global empires with naval commanders like Aldebaran, who was basically the admiral of the seas. So Spain created the world's first global empire from which the sun literally never set. They also created the first global transport network, which was their treasure fleets. And really, they peaked between 1556 and 1621 under Philip II and Philip III of Spain. So what went wrong? And let's start breaking it down now. The first problem was what they call the resource problem, the embarrassment of riches, because Spain operated the world's largest silver economy. The amount of gold and silver coming from the Americas was an insane quantity that just drove inflation to extraordinary levels. It was quite like the modern version of QE, wealth that you haven't really earned. And what it did is it essentially destroyed the trade and the industry for about 500 years in Spain, because that gold and silver just flooded in. But unfortunately, at the time, they'd also expelled all the Jews and all the Protestants and all the Muslims. So they lost the diversity and the trade and the banking expertise that they had during their golden age, which is why you have the Cordoba and the Alhambra, which really represents the peak of their golden age, but it then disappears because you've expelled that rich diversity that creates beautiful architecture like that. So that's number one. The Columbian Exchange actually worked against Spain. It created inflation, and once you had inflation, you destroyed the industrial base, and that industrial base moved north into the Swiss, the Italians, and the Belgians. To tell this story correctly, we also have to go back to 1544, and Fra Bartolome de las Casas has prepared some gifts for Prince Philip, the future Emperor Philip II. And in that package were Mayans and people. He also had cocoa beans, he had sweet gum, and he had corn. And this is the first documented evidence of chocolate being in Spain. And they also prepared jars of chocolate for the abbot of the Piedra monastery. And a kind of chocolate milkshake was served at the time. So this is the beginning of chocolate in Spain. And for a very large period of time, it was very much focused on the aristocrats and the church. And that's the second reason for the decline and fall of Spain is all this gold and silver and corn and sweet gum and chocolate through their monopolistic system came to the elites. So the elites, like today's tech entrepreneurs, got extremely wealthy, and you created a massive amount of inequality. And from that inequality, you get instability. You also, in the Age of Kings and in the Age of Europe, if you give a king in Europe a lot of money, he's going to spend it. And he's going to spend it on his palace, which is the one we mentioned earlier, and on warfare. And of course, the Spanish fought just about every nation on earth. And it was a continuous series of wars, one of which is, of course, the famous Armada, and the loss of money and the financial impact of that Armada was pretty catastrophic. So you have essentially, you've got the inflation from unearned income, i.e. the silver and gold. You've got the driving out of the diversity and the trade of the Jewish, the Muslims, and the Protestant Christians. You then have a concentration of wealth into the very, very richest, and that includes the king. And we know how a king in this period is going to spend his money. He's going to spend it on warfare, and that is exactly what he did. Now, there's another clue in that palace, Escorial, because Philip II's bedroom is right next to the church. And that tells you about the Spanish love of Catholicism. And with that came the Spanish Inquisition, which they established in Mexico in 1570. And the Spanish Inquisition was used to persecute chocolate lovers, predominantly women. And we have a very good example of Juan de Fuentes, a 33-year-old mixed-race construction worker, who approached the Inquisition. And he said that his wife, Cecilia, had bewitched his masculinity. And he found himself compelled, strangely, to make a morning hot chocolate for his wife, Cecilia. And he felt that this could only be from bewitching from the chocolate. Now, the colonial authorities of the Spanish Inquisition concluded automatically that a man serving his wife breakfast in bed could only be the work of the devil. And this cannot be natural. And the court commented that Cecilia had to go to jail. And we had another example of this. It was called the little bread roll, because she was rumored to have killed a woman using a bewitched chocolate roll. And essentially what we have is the Spanish Inquisition targeting chocolate as being devilish and the work of pagans. And of course, it didn't help that the Mexica used achiote, the kind of lipstick tree, and colored the chocolate. So when it was consumed, it looked like the locals were consuming blood. So another reason for the decline and fall of Spain was their obsession with Catholicism and their obsession with trying to eradicate any form of chocolate that didn't fit their criteria. And of course, chocolate was seen as a luxury. It was seen as pagan. It was seen like, it could potentially be bloody, and it was going to be expelled by the Inquisition and fought. So we've got 1, the inflation, 2, the lack of diversity, 3, the focus on religion and the persecution of any divergent views. And then finally, we've got the Spanish Inquisition that acted as a brake on creativity and inventiveness. And that is why the churros is the lead chocolate in Spain to this day. And it's Switzerland, Belgium, Britain, and Italy that have taken chocolate in Europe to the next level. So let me have your comments below. See if you can also understand or agree or disagree with chocolate as a metaphor for the decline in Spanish creativity for this 500-year period.